to our February Board Finance Committee meeting. We're a week earlier than normal, so we'll start off the agenda with public comments, and I have a card from Scott Van Saltma.
Hello, Scott Van Saltma again. A few different things I wanted to talk about this meeting. Number one, I see you guys are gonna buy some buses, which is fine. Good, glad to hear that. I'm glad you guys aren't jumping on the bandwagon with the electric buses. I don't think those really would work well, especially with our sub-freezing temperatures. So, and it's good that you guys are sticking with the same brand, the International, stick with the same fleet. I think consistency is good. I do still obviously have the request that these meetings get recorded. I was looking at the videos from last month's, another person recorded it, and it for some reason they break them down into multiple parts, but anyways, all of them had a little over 100 views. So people do watch this. Not everyone can make this at 8:30 on a Tuesday morning. So I do think that there is benefits for that. Also, I see that you guys are going for another bond. I believe that's for the operating millage. I was just curious how many bonds are currently active during, at the school year. And if it doesn't pass, what happens? And also, I'm curious regarding how much this election will cost, because we just obviously had a very large election last November, and obviously, if there's nothing else on the ballots for locals, then this school district has to pay for it. So, those are just my questions. Hopefully, they'll be answered during when you guys discuss that. So, thank you.
Just a couple of updates. Right now, we are right in the throes of professional learning, specifically around the areas of sciences and reading. Last week we did 2nd and 3rd grade. We posted that here in this space. Today we have 1st grade, and they are down in the multi-purpose room over at FAC. So they are working with bringing a consultant to help us with that. So they are working through some tech stuff that we got as a result of some of that 35J funding we received that the state is supporting. So lots of great benefits as a result of that. So we're excited about that. January 20 saw us doing some professional learning. Just to let the board know that all of our elementary teachers now have access to the Trails lessons, and so that's something that we'll start to utilize. Some information went out letting parents know as well that that's something that the board has approved and that we're looking to take advantage of. Julie, is this an appropriate time to talk about I saw obviously it's on the agenda, but just a little bit of explanation with the relinquishing of the grant funds, because I know you're going to talk about it, so I can provide a little.
Sure, no, go ahead.
One of the things that we are going to be recommending is it's kind of a strange thing. It's awkward for me to say I don't need money, so I don't often do that. Yep, noted, right, Julie? Yeah. But there's a form that we have to fill out, and it's a request to relinquish federal funds, and that's specifically tied to, it's called Title III immigrant funds. We're having a difficult time spending it because of the narrow scope of it, so rather than collect it, what we're saying is we don't need this because we have other funds that cover the things that we could use it for, specific to Title I, Section 41, and then some of our 31A grants. The scope of the money is such that we don't have people to support it as well, like it's supplemental materials. We can't get people, people are either interested in coming over the summer, either the families don't want to participate in that, or we can't get staffing for it. We have approximately almost $20,000 in carryover, and it's a $9,000 grant. So we have to seek we need a board signature to say we're going to relinquish that federal funding. If we see a need for it in the future, it's something that comes to us every year, but we'd like to seek permission from the board to say, yes, you don't need to take that money. Because the oversight of it, it comes with quite a bit of strings. there's any questions about that, because it's an unusual request, especially coming from the instruction office, where we tend to be consumers of funds, and, because we use those with students, but the funds that we have from other grants and things like that, really, take care of our students, and our regular programming, seems to be meeting the needs, in those areas. So, if you have any questions with that?
So this is something, well, when did we start bringing this in? We went out and sought this grant at what point?
At one point we did, and I don't know history-wise, CJ, when we would have done that.
It's a part of, it's a formula grant, so we receive it if we have students who are eligible, and we've been receiving it for years. It just becomes, it's increasingly difficult. So if you think of a cake as my probably the best way to describe it, right? You've got your base layer, which is your foundation, so that should be serving all the students, right? And then there's another layer for Title I funds that can service the students, and so you kind of keep building. This Title III immigrant funds is really kind of like the maraschino cherry sitting on the top of the cake, or a sundae, however you want to look at it. So it's really restrictive, and so we get it every year based on students who are eligible.
Gotcha. But so it's not something that we specifically go for this.
Yeah, no, it's a
Particular
part
grant.
of our
Okay.
entire consolidated application that includes Title I and
Got it.
Title II. We also receive, and there's another component of Title III, that's, on the language side as well. So there's a bunch of grants that are in this, and this is a piece of it.
Okay. And this gives up the 9,000 annually for this year?
Yeah, it gives up that carryover
It gives
piece
up the
plus
balance
the
as well.
current year, and then,
Okay.
just like Scott said, if there are 90 students across the entire system, and so that becomes really difficult to use that $9,000 to not just, to be effective,
Yeah,
right?
right,
To help
yep,
actually help
yep.
the students.
Because it has to be a program of some kind. I mean, you can't just buy it out of consumable or out of material.
Supplement,
Yeah.
it's, like I said, it's very, it's restrictive in terms of what you can do, and then if you do use it, it may negate another grant you're using, and so to cross them, like, I guess the easiest way to blame these terms, this grant doesn't play well with others,
Yep.
so.
It's just such a small amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So is this something that we would do annually then, or next year, are we allowed to say, don't send us Title III immigrant? We don't need that piece of this giant package that you sent?
Yeah, this is new for us
Yeah.
Okay,
even,
yeah.
so I think that's something that we probably have a conversation with our consultant. We're assigned a consultant at the state level for these funds, for
Yeah.
like that whole consolidated application, so something we'll
Okay. Yeah.
find out, and if this has to be an annual occurrence, then,
Probably annual, because
Figure
it's
it.
bundled in.
yeah. And it would probably, if it is annual, it would be much sooner in the year. This was new to us, this
Yeah.
kind of took us by surprise, like, we're not spending it, and they said, well, we need official board action on it, so.
Okay.
it's fine.
Like I said, it's an awkward thing.
For Scott to turn
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Right.
You say, no, I-
Noted.
You guys put that in the minutes.
Yeah.
You didn't want.
Check.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Asta.
Yeah, thanks, Julie.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Okay, so under discussion information, typically we see monthly financial statements here, but because this meeting is February 4th, we're still working on closing out the prior month. So we'll bring to you, reporting out on January and February at our March meeting when we're together for that. But I thought I'd take a few minutes and go through a bond construction update. Not a ton of changes. The first three on the screen you have seen before. We're kind of touching up those final items. The A to B still is really well. We can't wait to get completely out of there 100%, and they can't wait for us to completely get out of there. Pine Ridge, we've got that final phase turnover at spring break, and they're scheduled to be done in August. And Eastern Middle Office is moving along very well. We're trying to get ahead of schedule. I think maybe I said last month that we may even look at moving those offices at spring break. Knock on wood, but it just sticks that. Eastern Athletics is doing well, you know, and same thing with Northern at this time. They're kind of working on some of those buildings that we're putting out
Yep.
there. So that's going on. We know that we've got, about 5 weeks of cement work that needs to be done on Eastern. So it'll be tight for them to get on that build at the beginning of the season. But we're, it'll all just be weather dependent, right? You want the right conditions because you don't wanna pour cement, and then have to a couple years down the road, find you have an issue because you poured it too early, so. Central High Learning Environment, so that will begin in June. We're excited about that for the 2-year workflow. And then roofing, paving, and mechanical, a variety of locations. We have roofing on today's agenda. I'm just gonna take a minute because I could show you what we've got. It's not what it is. Okay, just takes a moment. So over at Eastern, and we'll talk through each of the recommendations under the action section, but I just wanted to give you a visual. We're doing those 3 academic wings for them. And then this is a shot of Pine Ridge, so basically the entire building is being done. And then the last but not least is we're doing the entire food service roof as well. So that's what's going on with roofing. You've previously approved paving and mechanical, those locations. Aquatic Center, we're kind of in a holding pattern. OAK is working on updated projected costs. So we've tried to narrow the scope a little bit to bring it down. We're, right now at that point, we're thinking they're about $3 million over budget. So I know we're still working on that piece. So we haven't met as a group. And then elementary playgrounds, we're excited. Corey did a wonderful job in meeting with each of the principals multiple times and talking through different options. We had a representative from Game Time there with him, and how do we bring in the accessible equipment, some accessible pieces with the budget that we had, and what are some other needs as they look through that. So thanks to Corey and his time, and the principals for their time in making sure we've got equipment that we think students will like. But we've got a couple samples. I could just pick one image from each of the attendance areas. So this is Orchard View, just to give you an idea of what that will look like on the location when they're done. And then here's a sample one from one of the Meadowbrook playgrounds as well. Great in that ramp environment, so students who need that can participate. And then here's a variety of pieces over at Floramo. So we're excited about the playground and that pending board approval. Some of that will even start this spring and roll into summer. Good Willie, it kind of screwed out of that, but Good Willie is the only site that we aren't doing that. It's a little bit more, it's a different program.
Yep.
So it's taking us a little bit longer to try to figure out what makes the most sense of that site. So we knew that doing all of them was a lofty goal anyway, but only having one for next summer is not bad. Design in progress, Northern Hills Middle, Ada Elementary, and Meadowbrook Elementary were all in the early phases of that. Northern Hills was a little bit further along. We've been meeting more frequently at that site. So I'm hoping maybe next month I could throw in a couple images. We're at that block phase for Northern Hills Middle about, if we did this, here's an option to create maybe some more collaboration spaces, some STEM spaces, that type of thing. On-demand collaboration is kind of what they're looking at too, just to give you some ideas. And then we're super early with Ada and Meadowbrook. Bond facilities team, we're trying to schedule our next meeting. It's very difficult with everybody's schedules, but we'll keep working through that to try to get something on the books for that. We think what we'll do is we'll go through some things. I'm gonna go through a couple of playbooks that we've had, and then maybe we'll go do some tours. Is our thinking for that meeting. When we get that on the books. And then just a reminder that Northern High Learning Environment, we have our kickoff meeting in May.
So will primaries be done before school starts?
Yes. That's the goal, completely.
Then the playgrounds, that's just summer?
Playgrounds will be done and ready for start of schools, yeah, right, Corey? Okay. Barring any, you know how that goes, but yes, that's the plan. The playgrounds will be ready for students and pretty much be completely ready for students as well. Okay, that takes us into our action items. We have our minutes from our January meeting. We have the recommendation to relinquish the Title III immigrant funds that Scott spoke about in his update. And then our next action item is for interactive flat panels. So we have been piloting a group, and we had 2 flat panels at each of the buildings. We have these flat panels, and have been working through some kinks as always, as you are introducing new technology. But we are ready to move on to do a second cohort for piloting. So in this recommendation, each of the elementary and middle schools will receive 2 more for classroom use. We wanna try to expand that a little bit. High schools would receive 4, and those between elementary, middle, and high are on the mobile cart, so similar to what we have in this room here. All would also receive a mobile cart for their media center to be able to use there. And then we also wanna test out some of the wall-mounted ones. You know, we've had some of our feedback and some of our classrooms, one on wheels is kind of spacious, it takes up a lot of room. And so we're going to, kind of test out a wall-mounted one. So we're gonna stick those in a conference room at the schools so that they can, you know, when they have meetings, whatever, they can go in there and kind of see what size that is, that type of thing. So, those are the ones that we're recommending in this cohort. We would continue with Digital Age Technologies. They have a contract under the RevSafe Purchasing Cooperative, so that would meet our bidding requirements. And the amount would be to not exceed $379,654. There is training in the, for this as well. The initial one is provided by either DAT or, the board manufacturer, BenQ. There's an online learning academy by BenQ. And then we would have a sign up for kind of some one-on-one support that would be provided by the district's instructional technology coordinator or a representative from BenQ. Share that with staff.
Obviously, there hasn't been negative feedback about the pilot that has happened. Has it been, pretty supportive? Like, not just, these are cool things and we have them on and whatever, but they're adding value or they're impacting learning or whatever? Has it been pretty well received at the places that have been using them already?
Yeah, I think so, especially as staff continues to be more comfortable with that. I think it remains, like Julie said, we worked through a few kinks here and there, and one of those kinks I think that they're trying to rectify, and that's putting one on, you know, on the wall and see how that goes. And continue to collect feedback. So.
Yeah, but they did good this year.
Just to add to it, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first cohort of people were people that were really comfortable with technology and early adopter types.
Sure.
And that's not this group, right? The cohort
Correct. We
2
worked
is.
with, we met with each one of the principals this time around too, to make sure that we've captured kind of that whole scope of, you know, comfort level with technology, to make sure, let's put it in a room where maybe it just doesn't come natural to learn these things. And we are also looking into, there's a BenQ certification program that will provide some additional learning opportunities where they can get certified and get some more practice in using it in the classroom. So.
Cool.
Good question.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, the next 3 action items are the roofing replacements, and we saw those images earlier. So the first one is for Eastern Middle High. We're recommending the low bidder Advanced Construction Group for an amount not to exceed $574,924. That would include some contingency funds. For all 3 of these roofing projects, we had just a fantastic turnout for interest in wanting to participate. So that was great to see. Yeah, they're the low bidder there. For Pine Ridge, we're also recommending the low bidder, which is Division 7 Building Contractors. That would be for an amount not to exceed $569,176. That too includes some contingency funds in case they find something during the course of that, or during the process of replacing them. And then food service is gonna break the bank. We're recommending low bidder Modern Roofing for an amount not to exceed $125,190. That's a small facility. And again, that Modern Roofing is the low bidder for that one. All playground equipment, so we saw some images and, the work of Corey going out meeting with the principals. So we're recommending new playground equipment, from Game Time for an amount not to exceed $5,223,076. We are using the My Deal Purchasing Cooperative, so they have a contract in My Deal, so we've met our bidding requirements for that. And this is all within the, budget amount of the bond and what we had set aside for the new bond. So this will come out of our 2025 capital projects that will be selling bonds here shortly for that. And when, when if these get approved, we'll go into our project schedule that we have on our website for our community members to see. We'll enter that information for each of these so people can see where they actually came in at. The next action item is more classroom furniture, so updating furniture, finalizing a little bit at AD Vista, just some media center and some of the ancillary staff offices, if you think of like counseling, PT, OT, circling back to that. Pine Ridge, we just have 11 rooms left, and then Central Woodlands, Northern Trails. Central Middle School has just the art room left. Eastern Middle, Northern Hills Middle, Central High, Eastern High, and Northern High. And so those are rounding those out. There are still a few classrooms at the middle schools and high schools that we will need to circle back to. Those are more of like the specialty art room, science and industrial arts and those types of things. These are kind of like your standard classrooms with the options that we have for them. So we're recommending that we purchase that new furniture, variety of vendors, Custer, Duell, Great Lakes Interface Interiors, and VS America for an amount not to exceed $2,303,911. This will come from both the 2023 and the 2025 capital projects. So AD Vista and Pine Ridge will be from the 2023 and the other schools will come out of the 2025. And to meet the bidding requirements, they all have contracts from a variety of purchasing cooperatives, so E&I, My Deal, Omnia, and the TIPS. And then our next action item is to purchase 4 new buses, replacing existing one in our life cycle replacement from Midwest Transit for an amount not to exceed $646,464. So this would come from our 2025 capital projects. It's built into that. We want to be able to continue using the international bus. We've talked about how that fleet standardization is really important, especially when you talk about repairs and inventory. We just like that model. It's got great longevity. We don't have a ton of issues with it. And we'd be using the Michigan School Business Officials bus purchasing program that they have in place that meets the bidding requirements for that. Another item that's an annual occurrence, but Kelly, this will be new for you. So each year our taxing authorities send us a request that the board has to sign off on what's called a waiver and consent form. And this is related to delinquent personal property taxes. So personal property taxes are kind of like the equipment that's inside the building. So not the property itself, but the stuff that's in the building. And so they try to collect that, and when it's uncollectible after 5 years, they're able to turn that to the state to strike it from the rolls. We will still receive our money because the state will make up for that on the back end. But this year's amounts, we have a little chart that shares how much, still nothing from Ada, but a little bit from Cascade, Charter Township, City of Grand Rapids, City of Kentwood, and then Grand Rapids Charter Township is by far the much larger amount of $22,000. And then our last action item we have for today, and we talked about it last month's meeting, just to give you a little bit more information, but we are recommending that the board adopt a resolution setting the date of May 6th for a special election related to the operating millage. I can speak this morning. And so this is a part of our our operations, so this isn't, bond money, it's not for capital projects, this is for our day-to-day operations. And so we're requesting a 6-year renewal of our 18 mills. This is a component of our foundation allowance, so remember our foundation allowance is comprised of this local operating millage along with state funding. And so the state assumes all districts are levying this 18 mills in order to get the full $9,608 per pupil this year. If a district does not receive it, the state does not make up that difference. So for Forest Hills, that represents about $24 million. So if this doesn't pass, we would have to go back out to the community, but again, the state assumes that we're levying this, so we'd have to go back out, try to get something passed. You know, and if that's not happening, then we're gonna have to look at some changes to our programming and, you know, how we service our students. So this is not, what's really important is the properties that this is levied on, so it's not levied on your primary residence. It is, levied on, really just businesses, commercial and second homes, so if you do have 2 homes, your second home, that's not your primary residence, would be paying this. And then some agricultural, not very many, it just depends on how, that zoning and how that property is used. But right now, we're asking for a renewal of our 18.1297 mills. So we get authorization for more, but we're capped at what we can actually levy, so we can't levy more than 18. But having that authorization kind of protects us from that Headley rollback. And the Headley rollback comes into play when property values are growing faster than the rate of inflation, or 5%, so whichever is less. So that gives us that little protection, so it would pull that 18.1297 down. Let's say it was, you know, 1/10 of a mil of a rollback, so then we'd have 18.0297, but we still only levied at 18.
I think I wanted to just piggyback on, she did a great job of explaining that. She also did a great job, I think around the bond a while back, creating that document around school funding, and there's some videos around school funding and that. So if community is asking about, you know, this additional millage, referring them to that, to the website to see that information would be really helpful, because school finance is, confusing, because you don't, it's not like running a business, and there are different ways to spend the money. You know, bond and millages are completely different, but a lot of people don't understand that. But just referring them to either Julie or myself or that website would be really helpful, so if you do get any questions.
We'll be building out a webpage for this,
Great.
so that we'll be able to direct, community members there. I think that document Ben is referring to is the community budget guide that we released, and it talks about just our general operations, but also bond and those types of things, so.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, we're asking for an increase of 0.50 mil, but we can't ever levy more than 18. But this is to offset if we get that disparity.
Yes, if we have to roll back
We
because of
have
the
to roll back.
rising property
Okay.
values, yep.
Okay.
That's a great question. The last thing, the 6-year renewal, because this will address a little bit of what Scott talked about, is to try to get us onto the cycle of, this would put us on the 2030 presidential election. So when we last approved this, it was for a 10-year period, it was back in 2015. So to come out with the renewal, this is important for us to do this right now. It's a timing thing. So we were, you know, we heard from the board, we've heard from our community, hey, can we get this tied up so that we're not having to pay for the election? So that's why it's a 6-year renewal. Then we can tag on to that presidential election.
Why would it be I'm just asking, why not a 10-year renewal? Because then we hit the 2034 election.
It wouldn't hit we worked through it, it wouldn't hit that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just when we have to levy it.
it's
versus
when
the
we have
election
to levy
occurs.
it, and, yeah. We talked through we walked through the different scenarios of,
Okay.
you go on a gubernatorial, and there's nuances with
Yep.
going at a gubernatorial election. And so we felt that this was the best. And I think the other piece with it is to kind of keep it fresh in everyone's minds, right? We were deliberate about that with our rec millage renewal back in 2022.
Okay.
We did, that original one was a 20-year millage, and when we went out in 2022,
People are like,
we,
what's this?
what is this, right? And so that when we paired back to a 10-year, I think that's a piece of this as well, besides, you know, trying to tag it on.
Yep.
Is to kind of keep it a little bit fresher in people's minds,
Yep.
that what it is and why it's important. And it was just one of the things that when they passed Proposal A, I'm not sure they thought about that. I think they thought it was just a given that the 18 mils would be, and that wasn't in the language. It was that the community still needed to vote on
Yep.
the 18 mils.
Okay.
I think with all the recent bond millage stuff that we've done over the last couple of years, it'll be good, yeah, to remind people that this is just this is not for rec, this is not for aquatic centers, this is just for our operations, and it's a critical piece of the funding that we receive, and it's the same thing that these non-homestead properties have been paying for
Yep.
literally
Exactly.
30 years. It's not an increase, it's not anything, yeah.
We're just
Okay.
gonna need, sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
cut
no,
you.
no.
Go ahead. I don't know if our community's gonna understand that we're asking for a 0.5 increase, but we can't ever charge more.
That's the hard
Yeah.
part to
I
explain.
It's a part of
the
that
language is gonna
education.
be difficult.
Yep. Well, when we, so we had in November of 23, when we went out for our bond, we also went out for a 2-year, I'll just call it a Headley override. And so we were asking for more then, and so we were educating and explaining to our community at that point that if you do the math, it takes you more than the 18, and so we were already explaining that, and so we'll continue with that education and explanation of what's on our webpage, FAQs, the informational, documents that we'll put together for them, we'll explain that as well.
Yeah, hopefully that works in our favor, because yeah, we had to try and explain, we want the increase, but we're not actually gonna use the increase,
Yeah.
fully, all of that, so I'm hoping maybe that's still fresh in some people's minds. But obviously, just getting people out to come vote, on a random day in May when there's not a lot of other stuff happening will be important to spread the word.
It is, and I think, what did you say the percentage was, 70% are absentee?
That was in the last election,
In the
that we had,
last
so
election.
the county, 70% of the voters were
70%.
absentee.
In the presidential election? Yeah. So,
So we have to get that information out, prior to all of that. We'll be working on a calendar for communication.
and then just because this question obviously will arise, it's a fair question, do we know yet the cost of putting this on the ballot?
No, I don't know what that is, yeah.
We figure that out before at all, or do we not know?
I
till
can
after?
go back and look at the 2023,
Yeah.
because that wasn't tied anything, just to give us a general idea.
And it'll be based on if
If
anybody
anybody
else.
else is out there
Right,
as well,
right. So we don't
yeah.
need
We've been
official number.
monitoring that, but
Yeah.
at this point, we haven't recognized them.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, as soon as there's official anythings that's worth passing around electronically or whatever, happy to be a part of
And
that.
it's just an important reminder about like what we can do is we can share factual information only.
Yeah.
We can't advocate for somebody to vote, either way in this, so we'll make sure our employees, have that renewed knowledge of, hey, you can just share factual information, but not advocate for it.
Yep.
All part of the educating and sharing of information about it, so. All right, that was our
Okay.
last action item. I'm gonna turn it over to Ben for administrative update.
All right, just a limited amount today, just to recognize, with all the political actions and the executive orders and things that have been, given. We will continue to get legal updates and, respond, as necessary. So many of the items that come out, there are, planning timeframes, within 90 days, within 100 days, plans gotta be created by the federal government, and then those get executed and, sent to us for implementation and so on. So, our legal firms are doing a good job of trying to keep, ahead of, for what we need to do. But just wanna recognize that we're aware of all of these things that are being said and, how they impact us. So, I just wanna recognize that. We have talked a little bit about the safety, PD, just to let the board know, after we had a large event like that, the next step is to reflect on what went well, and if you were gonna do something different, what it would look like, especially with bringing together such a large amount of people. So we did that yesterday with our leadership team, got some good feedback, on both sides as far as, what to do differently, as well as, you know, what went well, and then we have our safety committee meeting tomorrow, and that will help us with what next steps would be, in the different attendance regions, cause, all of them, you know, are at different stages in their journey around, school safety and security and the different training that they've had over time here in the district, so, but a lot going on, but, nothing, you know, overly new to share with you today, so.
How does feedback work after a full-scale PD? Do you try to solicit it from everybody who attended, just say voluntary feedback?
In essence, so there were, we had on that day, we had a QR code where people could give reflections on the morning session and then what questions they had when they were done with it. And then in the afternoons, there was specific training based on this, whether it's secondary and elementary, and then they again had the opportunity, the staff had the opportunity to respond to their survey, to give feedback. And then basically that came, you know, out yesterday when we were talking, and they know, you know, at the building level, what went well and what things to consider differently, and they shared that with us, and they'll share that more tomorrow in the safety and security as far as next steps. So, yeah, it's from anybody that was participating was given the opportunity to give feedback, so, yeah.
Good, great.
And the cursory feedback I got was positive, so.
Yeah, that's good, good, thanks.
380 responses. And I
300.
did ask the question, so I won't get
Thanks, Scott.
That's actually a lot.
It's pretty good.
It is
That's
a lot.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
That's all we have
Yeah,
for you this
anything else?
morning.
Thanks.
Great. If you have questions on any of the items,